I used to think that no one ever experienced familial abandonment. That conviction, however, was dashed the day my mother silently closed the curtain and locked the front door while I stood on the porch, shivering like a stranger and saturated with rain. I was 9 years old. It's the kind of incident that forever alters your perception of love. I'm Alice, and this is how I ceased to be a daughter and began to live independently. Our Minnesota home was typical from the outside: white siding, a well kept lawn, and a swing set that we never used. Something colder than any blizzard outside, however, was behind that door. Jason and Linda, my parents, weren't monsters. Not the type you see in movies on Lifetime. They were well spoken, courteous, and cherished members of the community. My mother was a teacher, while my father served in the military, the kind that smiled at neighbors and brought casseroles to church functions. However, they viewed love at home as a weakness that should be subdued before the outside world could worsen it. It was a quiet dinner, too silent. You remained silent until someone talked to you. My mother used to set a kitchen timer and say, 3 minutes. If you were crying, then gather yourself. It wasn't discipline, it was combat. Each word was an order. Every quiet moment is a warning. By the time I was 10, I could read a whole room by observing my mother's sighs or my father's tapping fingers on the table. I became an expert in the subtle weather systems: disappointment seeping from the corners of a mouth, tightness in the jawline, and fury simmering in the eyebrows. I wasn't their daughter. They used to call me their first experiment. A test. I would have no one to blame but myself if I failed in life. It never truly left my body, which is why I can still clearly recall one winter night. I was 9 years old. I neglected to remove the trash. Jason didn't shout. He didn't have to. He simply pulled me out in my pajamas, opened the back door, and said, "Stand here until you understand responsibility." He then closed the door. Without a coat, no footwear. The temperature was 34. I have ash like snow flurries stuck to my hair. For almost an hour, I stood there with my legs trembling and my cheeks burning with shame and cold. "Hopefully next time, you'll think twice before being useless," my mother murmured, looking down at me as the door finally cracked open. It was a word that buried itself deep in my chest and stayed there for years: useless. I missed the school bus at 11, slept in too late. My mother declined to give me a ride. "You made the mistake," my father responded. "You make it right." So I went for a walk, half a mile, with a bottle of warm water and a 20-pound rucksack, in the sweltering heat of Florida. My feet were blistering and drenched in sweat when I finally made it to school, almost 2 hours late. My mother said, "She needs to learn not to be dependent," and hung up when the teacher contacted the house. Friends shrugged when I informed them. They called them strict parents. No, strict is not the same. Parents that are strict yell. Mine was trained. I was prepared for quiet, exercises, and repercussions disguised as education when I was 15. However, nothing could have prepared me for their next move. We were traveling to Tallahassee to see relatives. For the majority of the trip, Jason and Linda quarreled about things like directions, what to wear, and if my cousin's parents were more polite. I ignored them. Their static was nothing new to me. Half drowsy from the heat, sitting in the back seat with headphones on, we made a stop at a dilapidated train station in the town of Crestview. Signage with chipping paint. "Everything is baked in the sun." Turning, Jason said flatly, "Go get me a soda." "Sweet as poison," Linda added. "And a bottle of water for me, darling." "Move quickly." Even though I was itching within, I left. I inserted my final $10 bill into the dying vending machine. It coughed, spit out a lukewarm can, and moaned. The automobile was gone when I turned around. Not shifted, lost, not a word, nobody, not a single tire mark. Just an empty parking lot gazing back at me like a dare, with a chorus of cicadas shrieking overhead. I was still. My phone then buzzed. A message. "How long does it take you to get home by yourself?" "It's a test. Do not give Aunt Elaine a call. You must develop your ability to face reality." My chest gave way under itself. I was 16, not a license. No money, no strategy, nobody. Not even a family, it seems. I refrained from crying. I refrained from screaming, with my legs buckling as if they were about to give out. I proceeded toward the station after smashing the water bottle in my hand. I inquired about the existence of a bus station from the clerk behind the desk, who was half sleeping. Without looking up, he muttered, 2 miles that way. Next bus? Tomorrow afternoon. So I went for a walk. The only way that didn't feel like surrender was forward. Not because I knew where I was heading. I called Aunt Elaine, the one thing they prohibited me from doing. The second ring caught her attention. Alice? Her voice broke. I said, they left me, and my voice cracked for the first time. A pause occurred. Then she spoke, clearly and firmly. Continue to be where you are. I'll be there. Dust kicked beneath her tires like a signal fire as she pulled up. Arms wide, her voice trembling, she leaped forth. My poor girl. Oh my God. I didn't answer. I was unable to. With my head against the first chest that didn't flinch as I leaned in, I simply fell into her. I will not return, I muttered. She didn't dispute. She simply kept me closer. Aunt Elaine lived in a little, dilapidated home near Gainesville that smelled like fabric softener and cinnamon. It looked like a church to me. That first night, she didn't ask any questions. Simply gave me a soft towel, showed me the restroom, and said, take your time, honey. I spent a lot of time looking at myself in the mirror. My eyes appeared to be unnatural, my lips were cracked, and my hair was matted. The girl peering back was someone I didn't recognize. It was the longest shower I've ever taken. It was because no one was timing me for the first time in 16 years. Not because I was filthy. There was nobody shouting through the door. If I didn't hurry, nobody threatened to turn off the hot water. I watched the steam curl against the mirror, like smoke rising from a freshly extinguished object, as I remained there, allowing it to fill the room. Elaine prepared tomato soup and toasted cheese. With the exception of the odd throat clear and the clink of spoons, we ate in silence. I saw that she was giving me room by not resting her elbows on the table, not because it was impolite, as if I were a wild animal that might run away if she moved too quickly. She was correct. She arranged a guest room, with additional cushions and a lavender-scented blanket that evening. She said, I'm down the hall if you need anything. I couldn't say thank you yet, so I didn't. But somewhere beneath the debris, I could hear it reverberating inside of me. I stayed inside for the first 2 weeks. I got a lot of sleep, ate at odd rhythms. On occasion, I would wince when Elaine came in too soon. My body continued to think that I was somewhere I wasn't. I discovered a message attached to the refrigerator one morning, visiting the marketplace. This is a safe place for you. If you would like, lock the door. I adore you. Love you is the final line. And that really got to me. Softness without a catch left me unsure of how to respond. Elaine moved slowly. She didn't push. She allowed me to choose clothes that didn't seem like punishment. When she took me to Goodwill, signed me up for a library membership, and bought me notebooks just in case you want to write anything down. She even shared her old laptop with me. It's not much, she remarked, but it's yours and it runs. Yours. I held it as if blinking too forcefully would make it disappear. My return to school took 6 weeks. Gainesville's public high school was not a scene from a movie where I walked in slow motion, and everyone turned. The place was fluorescent, clumsy, and filled with overcompensating boys, murmurs, and odors. I lowered my head, seated in the rear, didn't speak much. I was perceived as shy by my professors. I wasn't timid. Shell shock hit me. However, English literature was the class I kept looking forward to. The first adult to look at me and see something other than trouble or weakness was the teacher, Mr. Reynolds. He assigned us to write a one-page narrative about a life-altering event. I nearly left. However, I didn't. Rather, I remained up that night, sitting cross-legged on Elaine's rug in the living room, my hands quivering and my laptop humming against my knees. I also wrote. Regarding the vending machine, I wrote about the pavement and the sun, about how the automobile vanished like a cruel magic trick. Their names were not used by me. I didn't have to. The first time I knew I was alone is the title I gave it. Without glancing at him, I turned it in. Mr. Reynolds invited me to stay after class a week later. I felt my gut tighten. I awaited the censure, the criticism, and the stern counsel to keep things appropriate. Rather, he returned the paper to me, circling 3 phrases in red ink. You write. I gazed at the page as though it were written in a language I didn't understand. You've never heard that from anyone before, have you? Gently, he inquired. I gave a headshake. He didn't exert pressure, just responded, "Go on," and turned to leave. I launched a new Word document when I got home that evening. Title: The Silent People Listen All the Time. I also wrote, Day after school, each night before going to bed. Just a paragraph, maybe. 15 pages without blinking, sometimes. I wrote about myself and other girls. Invisible, intelligent, angry girls who lived through homes that were wonderful on the outside but tore you to shreds on the inside. The first thing that truly belonged to me in life was writing. Not a job, not a penalty. No one could steal it or twist it. Only my. My story was framed by Elaine. She hung it between her bedroom and the bathroom in the corridor. Isn't that strange? Embarrassed, I asked. Nope, she replied. It reminds me that it's not always loud to survive. She understood. She understood it completely. I started working as a part-time bookshelf employee at the library when I was 17. It felt solemn, yet it wasn't glitzy. In a manner that no other place ever could, the scent of ancient pages and the soft murmur of ideas lingered in the air. I saw a woman sobbing in the poetry section one afternoon. She added, I don't know why I'm falling apart, apologized, and used the edge of her sleeve to wipe her face. Yes, I did. I then gave her a book. The score is kept by the body. She regarded me as though I had given her a flashlight in the dark. At that point, I began to realize something that would eternally alter who I am. I wasn't damaged. I was changed. And perhaps there was a reason for its shape. What they didn't intentionally let me see. I received full scholarship to college, not because I was a valedictorian, but more because trauma makes you compulsive, and I didn't skip class while I was preoccupied with it. Silence was the topic of my essay, not the pretty type, not a peace moment. I wrote about the sharpness of quiet, tactical. Speaking teaches you to be silent, yet remaining silent could mean the difference between survival and punishment. I received a personal call from the admissions officer. She remarked, I've never read anything like it. In the midst of the library's break room, next to a microwave that usually smelled like popcorn and regret, I hung up and sobbed. To begin at a state university, I relocated to Tallahassee, majoring in journalism and minoring in trauma psychology. No one, least of all me, missed the irony. When she dropped me off, Elaine was crying, as opposed to a Hallmark film. Silently, still holding my hand, one hand on the steering wheel, she muttered, I wish I could have protected you. I simply stared at her, really looked, and let her see what I had become, without saying, You did. Because it's not always a fight to survive. There are moments when it seems like showing up anyhow. It was difficult to go to college. I had no idea how to coexist with humans. I had no idea what it meant to go out on weekends or trust your roommate. My body tensed up whenever someone spoke louder, even when they were laughing, like I was still in Jason's house, according to my neurological system. However, I wrote, God. In some way, every item I submitted for class ended up becoming a little expose. On shelters with insufficient beds, on missing girls who weren't wealthy enough to garner media attention, on survivors who were held accountable for not being perfect victims. I received a reputation for being intense. I didn't give a damn. Writing for grades wasn't my goal. It was nearly too late when I wrote for the version of myself that never had a voice. I was given an internship with a charity organization that focused on chronic abuse cases. My sophomore year, most of them were domestic, but some were institutional. I contributed to the organization of log statements, reports, and copy that didn't sound like legalese. I was reviewing intake documents one day, dates, names, and painfully scribbled margins. Before I noticed it, the most of it faded into a sort of numbness regarding Alice Holloway. Date of incident, July 3, 2020. By way of notification, Linda Holloway. The child is manipulative and attention-seeking, according to the statement. Will say anything to escape taking accountability. We worry that she might become out of control. My throat shut. It was a report, submitted against me, by my own mom. The day after they dropped me off at the train station, I filed with a local agency. I read on. We didn't leave her behind. We tested her. She took off running, most likely residing with distant family members. Kindly notify us if she attempts to contact CPS or the police. I was unable to sense my body. Just the sensation of blood rushing through my ears, similar to being too near railroad tracks. She had taken care of it. I submitted a preemptive report to ensure that I wouldn't appear unstable if I did need assistance. And it was successful. Nobody came to find me, since the well has already been poisoned by them. After leaving the office, I sat on the curb outside, with my hands shaking and my eyes narrowing. My boss did the same. She remained silent, simply sat next to me with their knees raised like a child. Was it awful? Softly, she inquired. I gave the file to her. She perused it, remained silent. Then, as if it were radioactive, carefully folded it. You wish to file a report? I gave a headshake. I wish to recall it, because I now comprehended. It was more than abuse. It was a plan. Linda and Jason maintained their composure. They were in charge. They were deliberate in their harshness. Recorded, proactive. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't unsure if it was genuine. It was authentic. I also had evidence. I didn't immediately tell Elaine. I didn't want to see her place the responsibility on herself once more. I composed a piece instead. It was intended to be an anonymous blog entry for a magazine that focuses on survivors. But I had a gut feeling that said no, not now. I therefore signed it. Holloway, Alice. Distinguished and well-respected Jason and Linda Holloway's daughter. They abandoned the girl like a bag of garbage at a train station. The post became widely shared, silently going viral. Not the dancing type of TikTok. However, reblogs, comments from strangers, and whispers in forums that say, I thought I was the only one. A journalist then got in touch. I want to do a feature interview with you. You know, your tale isn't just yours. Suddenly, I had to make a choice. Did I want to set everything on fire? Or did I want to use it to construct something? The following weekend, I went to Elaine's. Cicadas buzzed in the trees as we sipped coffee on the balcony. I discovered something, I declared. She raised her head. A document. After they left me, Mom filed a report. It was prearranged. This time, Elaine didn't cry. For a minute, she simply sat motionless. I always suspected, he added. For a while, we sat in silence. So, what are you going to do with it? She continued. I glanced at the other side of the yard. Through the branches, sunlight streamed in. It all smelled of fresh starts and freshly cut grass. I said, I think I'm done hiding. I meant it too. Those who attempted to erase me knocked on my door. I received my first speaking invitation a year after the article was published. It took place on the campus of a tiny Georgian college. Reclaiming narratives is the theme. I nearly skipped it. Standing in front of a microphone and having my voice fill a room full of people who genuinely wanted to listen felt like wearing unfitting clothes, as if public speaking will exacerbate my scars. However, I went. I was dressed simply with a black blazer, one of Elaine's vintage silver wristbands, used chapstick instead of makeup. I told 100 strangers how I had been trained to vanish while standing on a platform that smelled like old wood and pine-scented floor cleaner. I refrained from crying. I didn't tremble. I simply spoke the truth. People waited in line to thank me after that. Not because I was theatrical, courageous, or inspirational, but because I had spoken something that they couldn't express. My parents used to time my crying too, a girl whispered as she gave me a hug. I held her like if we were both 9 years old. I was more than simply a survivor by the time I received my diploma. I was a researcher, a writer, a speaker, and a voice for the silent children who had none. Together with my buddy Nadia, I launched the Still Here podcast. Every week, we highlighted survival tales that didn't conform to the norm, not sanitized for donation brochures, not noisy, and not tidy. Just the truth. We had a simple slogan: nobody came to our rescue. Thus, we were able to save ourselves. Then it took place. When I checked our email account one afternoon, I saw a message with the following subject line. From Jason Holloway, I went cold. I took a while to open it. simply gazed at the screen as if it were about to blink. At last, I understood. It wasn't very long. Alice, we've heard about your activities. If you need closure, we're prepared to have a conversation and set the record straight. Mom is missing you. Dad, I'm missed. As if I were a misplaced sock or a hotel room phone charger. As if I hadn't been intentionally thrown out. I didn't answer. However, I also didn't remove it. Not because I desired a reunion. However, I had to keep in mind how manipulators reinterpret situations. How they use the word closure to refer to control. A letter arrived at Elaine's home a week later. Written by hand. Blue ink. The handwriting of Linda. Like a teacher's grading rubric, it's neat and skewed. I am aware of your anger. However, we gave it our all. For you to develop, we had to be firm. Now look at you, you've achieved such success. Perhaps after all, we weren't such lousy parents. I burst out laughing. Not because it was amusing. However, it was so on brand. Linda's specialty was harshness disguised as knowledge. Abuse, marketed as a tactic. She now claimed to have saved my life, as if I were a prize-winning science fair project. I didn't respond. I wrote another essay instead. For clarity, not retaliation. They left me at a train station was the title. They now seek closure. I described everything, including how it felt as well as what actually occurred. The shame, the gaslighting. Now that I was doing well enough to be useful again, they had attempted to change my story. In 3 days, 600,000 people shared the article. I was more than just a voice in a tiny space all of a sudden. I was everywhere. A news organization called. A book agent comes next. Then a lawyer stated, "You have a case if you ever want to pursue civil action." I didn't want court, though. I didn't want to drag them through publicity, legal action, or theatrical apologies. All I wanted to do was be honest. They couldn't even pretend it hadn't happened because it was so loud and obvious. I received a call from a private number a month later. I nearly let it ring. However, I responded, "Hey?" A pause occurred. Then, "Alice, it's Linda." I remained silent. That was an invitation to her. "I read your writing. I simply want you to know that we were unaware of how deeply we had wounded you." I took a slow breath. "Were you unaware?" Silently, I said. "Or didn't give a damn?" Quiet. Then she gave it another go. "You've grown really amazing. I've always recognized your ability." "Mom," I murmured, my voice stale and strange. "I became who I am despite you. Not due to you." One more pause, she claimed. "We were strict, but now you're strong." "No," I said, my voice even. "I have always been resilient. You simply didn't enjoy it." I hung up after that. Don't shout. No malfunction. Simply click. The last door shutting. Gentle. Final. I didn't immediately tell Elaine. I refrained from crying. That night, I simply went outside and sat on the porch. The sun was slowly lowering and the sky was crimson with summer heat. The wind chimes were disturbed by a breeze, and thinking about them made me feel nothing for the first time since I was 9. Not hatred. Not sorrow. No desire. Simply put, distance. A canyon I no longer had to traverse. The day I quit bringing their ghosts with me. The healing process wasn't a smooth one. It arrived in pieces. Even minor details. On Tuesday mornings, I didn't get up anticipating an impact. I didn't hear anyone sighing behind me when I choose my own cereal brand in grocery aisles. In laughter that was neither borrowed nor fleeting. Every morning at 6:15, Elaine continued to make coffee while singing an off-key song from the 1970s. Nevertheless, barefoot and using a blanket like a robe, I joined her in the kitchen. We didn't discuss closure. We discussed whether the hydrangeas needed to be pruned or what to bake for supper. That was sufficient. I never went back to the Minnesota house. Like an old fever dream, it lingered in my memory, hazy in the middle and sharp around the edges. People occasionally inquire as to whether I ever consider facing them directly, focusing on Jason. I wanted to know if Linda ever really saw me. I also don't. Because I don't need answers from individuals who took pleasure in keeping them from me. I was raised by their silence. I was formed by their cruelty. However, their consent? The prize has never been that. I had my first book published by the age of 25. It wasn't a memoir. It was an anthology of writings, tales of people like me who were rebuilt rather than saved. No happy endings, only sincere ones. It created some noise in calm settings, such as late night book clubs, college classrooms, and trauma forums. However, it was a letter from a girl named June that I found most memorable. Her age was 16, had fled Missouri from a disciplinary family. In a teenage shelter, she read my article and wrote, "Until I heard it written in your voice, I had no idea what was happening to me. I do now. Now I'm safe. Thank you." When Elaine handed me that old laptop, I bought a diary, which I then folded and slipped inside the first journal I ever filled. I still open it occasionally, make contact with the page, and keep in mind, not the agony, the clarity. Elaine grew older, her knees began to groan. Then she went to decaf, began using the term my girls to describe her plants. Outside of Tallahassee, we moved into a one-story cottage with an overabundance of bookshelves and a wraparound porch. We sowed wildflowers. She refers to it as retirement. I refer to it as belonging. I am now a teacher, not on a full-time basis. The university only offers a few seminars every semester. Narrative Truth. Writing What They Tried to Erase is the title of my course. Pupils arrive anticipating methods. Form, advice on going viral. Silence is what they receive. Keeping a journal. A stack of blank pages with a candle in the middle of the room. Because naming what happened can often be the most courageous thing you can do. Then act as though it no longer owns you. I have a picture on my desk. It's not of Linda or Jason. It features Elaine and me, captured on the book's release day. The breeze is grabbing the edge of her scarf as we sit on the porch with matching mugs. We aren't grinning for the photographer. We're simply there. There. Still. Actual. I occasionally receive letters from people who were acquainted with my parents. They say things like, "Your mother was strict, but she meant well," or "Your father was so respected." I don't answer. They are not corrected by me, since I'm not here to change how they see the past. My purpose is to live mine. People believe that healing entails some monumental event, such as an epiphany, a confrontation, or an apology. My own, however, arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Outside, I was hanging washing, the grass with bare feet, buzzing cicadas, and all of a sudden, I understood. It had been weeks since I had given them any thought. They had vanished, still alive. Simply put, unimportant. It was like a poor chapter in a book I didn't need to read again. I will now end it here, not in retaliation, not with pardon, only freedom. The type that doesn't require yelling. The kind you work for. The type that allows you to really, truly let go of the burden and leave